Travel beyond cars is a pretty demanding topic for a session that started with a premiere of a new in-car app store. And I think the notion of traveling beyond cars from today's perspective, at least from the perspective of a mobility practitioner, is still far out. Nevertheless, I think the panel we have accomplished today is a group of experts that will help us to understand how that transformation is actually working and how individual bits and pieces of applying technology actually can help to achieve that topic. Let me remind the audience maybe here and us all that the principal mode of transport in today's commuting world is still the passenger car, and that across all geographies in the world. Who traveled here by taxi this morning in Barcelona witnessed a little bit what that means, both in terms of availability but also in terms of congestion. I'm actually happy that we did not have this conference in other places in the world where congestion consumes up to 8 days in a year for people who actually are on this commute. So I think there is a need to change. And on MWC, we're talking a lot about the emergence of new ecosystems. We just saw it in the presentation of Riklef. But there's a lot of opportunity emerging from technologies like 5G and IoT. And I think the momentum that this development shows right now shows that we're actually working towards more automated transport systems. We talk about lower emissions. We talk about more sustainable solutions. So I'm curious to have the discussion today with all of our experts to see how they contribute to finding out what people's mobility needs are and how to cater for them. Maybe just to remind us all a little bit of what the technological transition that we witness here actually means for mobility. I think it is a key enabler for the development of further future electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and I'm not talking about cars in this specific context. I'm also talking for systems like rail and transit vehicles. You probably are aware of the telecommunication transition that's happening in the rail sector, FRMCS, which will enable a lot of higher automation standards in rail. But it's probably also going to be about making better use of cars. If we want to kind of move off of them, we should start reconsidering the use of cars as such. Probably more sharing options will be playing a role in the future, and the integration of smart technologies into onboard systems like the ones we just saw will basically build the glue between all of the different modes. A development of connected infrastructure is something that goes in line with that transition. And the true mobility transition will only work if, of course, also the use of renewable energies is considered appropriately. So in essence, before getting started, one of the key credos that we share at Accenture is that if you want to move people, you actually need to know what moves them. So customer centricity and actually understanding what passengers and commuters and people with mobility needs have drives the pinpointed development of solutions to actually go to more sustainable and to more comfortable modes of transport. Now, Benjamin, I wanted to start asking you with regards to what we saw from Riklef, basically going closer to the customer, going closer to the passenger, meeting him in the car. What, from your perspective, is driving people's needs in a mobility ecosystem like Western Europe today?
Yeah, thanks for the question, and good to see you here. Yeah, first of all, ioki is a subsidiary of Deutsche Bahn, so we are full in the mobility business and define mobility a bit larger than car for sure. But when we talk about customer experience, it's our aim to say, finally, there is not a need to have a one-on-one individual car anymore, because we believe shared mobility is key. And we have seen a lot of sessions today from 5G and connectivity. At the end, we are right now starting with the first autonomous vehicle on the road, where we deliver the software stack to give your customer preference combined in an algorithm built and connected with a car, so that the car picks you up directly at your door. And finally, that's a kind of mobility where we believe for sure there will be cars every time, but it makes sense to pool them. It makes sense to think public transport in the next generation, so that you probably at the end need your car for fun trips, for your family trips, where we see 4 people in a car, 5 people in a car, 3 people in a car, but hopefully not anymore when Markus goes with 1 by 1 in a taxi to the fair.
That's true, and as we heard from Rickleff, we don't want to be alone, right? So you're probably supported by that genuine human need. Peter, which role will cars play in NEOM?
Yeah, look, I think it's an interesting question. You know, one of the advantages we've got in NEOM is we have a blank sheet of paper, right? We're designing the city of the future, so that we don't have a lot of that legacy infrastructure. So we work a lot with our mobility teams and are talking to them in terms of what do they think mobility is going to look like in 2040, 2045, and it's everything from micro mobility, like personal scooters and transports, but also even things like flying drones and flying personal vehicles. And one of the key requirements from us in designing that connectivity infrastructure is about that intercommunication, not only between the machine-to-machine communications, so as those devices are going around, they're getting information from the street lighting system or the rubbish bin or the sign, but also this is where we see a role for things like digital twin and the metaverse, because how do I also make sure that, that tree hasn't grown by 2 inches in the last month, so when my drone's flying over to do that. So that's really where we're starting, right? We're starting with that architecture. We're sort of trying to work backwards with this view of mobility could be anything in 2040, 2045 that we're building the city for.
Mm-hmm. And you're doing that in a geography where, let's say, the MIT actually predicts a growing use of cars, at least on a small percentage basis. So that's quite an ambitious goal, right? So I would say.
It is, and I think, one of the things is, when you get to design a city from scratch, it really changes your perception on what mobility is, right? Mm. So just to give you an example, one of the areas that they've been looking at the moment is around, as you design buildings, actually building the corridors and the ducts for service robots. Because if you apply them to existing buildings, those robots then have to factor in human interactions and taking care of the building, of the people. If you're building a building from scratch around that mobility, you have the ability to actually hide some of that capability, so your service robot may be coming out of the wall, or you may be getting things coming out of the ceiling. So I think that's the opportunity. But one of the key things, I might defer to one of my colleagues here, is to make all that happen, it's about trust, right? So if I'm collecting information so that I can make my decision on what route or what path I'm going to take as an autonomous vehicle, I need to make sure that the other device or the inanimate object that's giving me information, that I can trust that information.
Mm-hmm. Yoshinori, you are operating in a world that is, from a mobility perspective, very mature, and that has probably, customer needs that are, very, very highly equipped with being used to public transport systems that are very efficient. I mean, one of the most efficient railway systems in the world, for example, in Japan. What are your experiences in contrast to Peter, who is building a city from scratch?
Yeah.
What are your experiences in venturing out into new partnerships like the one you built with Toyota?
Yes, we try to implement try to develop outcome communications with the Toyotas and also the other road maintenance companies in Japan. And when we see the communication and automotive societies, they think always the safety transportations. That's the most important things. And any kind of the technology is directed to the safeties. And so even we try to harmonize the mobile communications to the such as transportations, cars or others, we need to keep the communication without any disruptions. And also, one of the big difference between the mobile communication, especially the smartphone and the cars, vehicles, life cycles actually. And because the mobile system changes every 10 years in Japan case, but car continues owned by single users 10 years or more. In that case, the generation gap happens. So we are currently struggling how to solve such a life cycle difference. Yes.
Okay.
And also, I think in the near future, currently or near futures, we faces that the traffic will increase from the cars or other transportation systems. And the feature should be different from the smartphone users. Like, car goes very different places, and the suburb or, urban area will become important. And we need, create a new development or expanding the infrastructures to such as suburb areas, even the high performance communications.
Okay.
Yes.
So, security, trust. Dharminder, I'm looking at you. There was a very recent paper by the London School of Economics that said that big transformations need to, or most likely follow into two categories. They are transformations by design or by disaster. Which path do you think the mobility transition will take? And what are you doing to make it a success?
Yeah, so hopefully it takes the design part, not the disaster part, right? But
Yes.
everywhere where you go in your digital life, security is becoming key, right? Without security for a car from going from place A to place B, in the old-fashioned way when nothing was digitalized, that was the key main thing for the automotive industry. Now with connectivity and what we saw just launch is basically software on wheels, right? So security is key, essential for the user to make sure that if I'm getting into that vehicle, that I know it's secure enough. Not that I'm driving and the car stops and say, hey, you are hit by ransomware, for example. We have to do a lot of still learning in this case, right? Because connectivity is one, 5G is the topic everywhere. There are so many ways to look at this modern way how we are moving. And it's all about, like my colleague said over here, trust. In IT language, zero trust, right? Always verify, always verify. And that continuously goes on. And even in the automotive industry, every step that the industry is making is always with the mindset, you know, A to B in a safe and secure way. So the security is really having that place in the industry where are more R&D spent on from the automotive industry. There are more proof of concepts going on to make sure. Of course, you don't want a lawsuit, right?
Yeah.
Because your system is hacked.
That's a good point, Ram. You have been working a long time, as we heard, with companies like Volkswagen. I think the interesting development that I observe is that we're basically moving in terminology. Since this session is called Travel Beyond Cars, the terminology is changing, right? We're not talking about software-defined cars. We're talking about software-defined vehicles. Vehicles can have all shapes and forms, all shapes and uses. How do you anticipate your spectrum of activities to enter also domains like public transport? How do you think about user interfaces in other means of transport than the classical car?
Yeah.
That's something that's on your agenda?
Yep. I think it starts first from how the consumer experience has actually changed, inside the car first, right? So, like what Carrie had explained, it's gone are the days when we were just looking for a car to transport us from point A to point B to now being truly engaged, entertained, being productive. We are really trying to do all kinds of things behind the car now, right? And that calls for connectivity playing a bigger role. In the past, it was more about a best effort. At best, if you're connected, can I pull in some content from point to point, and that was enough. But now I think the reliability element has actually kicked in, and also, the consumer really needs to know when I'm going from A to B, what am I going to expect now? What kind of impediments are going to come in, which will allow my experiences to be tuned. So, maybe in the past, people were just moving from A to B in the most efficient manner, but maybe in the future, they're going to be basically making a route based on connectivity availability and what kind of experiences that they can actually get from A to B. And this is how it's going to kind of like pan out to begin with from the car. Now then, the mode of transportation has also changed now, right? So people are not going to be using the traditional way a car, because the car is also changing from a purebred ownership model to a rental model and different other models that are kicking in, and how you're kind of like moving from one mode of transport to the other, and how these experiences need to be seamless across different entities and different modes of transportation. And today, actually, 5G is expected to solve that problem, more from the angle of reliability, predictability, offering that one level of experience as you move from one mode of transport to another without really compromising on safety and security elements. So truly, we along with Carrier and VW Group are betting big on 5G as the technology, and then also continuing to invest along the way into the infrastructure space as well. So today, as you saw, Ignite is one of the first attempts to build that bridge between what we actually offer on the infrastructure into the car. But HARMAN has also been working along the way on bridging other nodes and gaps in this whole network envelope. Yeah? And the roadside units, which were originally a term that was coined for solving safety, will now move towards a terminology that will solve more content availability, information availability from point A to point B, and all of that. So, and unless all these elements are made available, we really are not going to be able to solve the puzzle of a fully autonomous car where the car just operates on its own. Infrastructure is going to play a big role in the future.
We'll get to the topic of infrastructure a little bit later. Thanks. So do you anticipate an in-train vehicle, in-train passenger application from HARMAN in the future?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
No, we are working on some of these things.
So in the race for the passenger.
Yep, absolutely.
Benjamin, will there be a ioki app in the CARIAD system very soon? How do you deal with the race for the passenger and basically capturing what the needs really are?
Yeah, that's definitely a good question. I think at the end, and that's where we currently collaborating with a lot of players in the industry, it's an ecosystem, and it's not about, more or less it's about frenemies. I mean, for sure, there's only one passenger, and we all deliver different solutions where we connect people, and believe that some of those solutions are fulfilled by using a car. Others might be perfectly fulfilled by using pooled cars or public transport or other options in the full mobility chain. So at the end, for sure, we are talking with a lot of suppliers and car manufacturers as well to see how the future offer on the street looks like. And it won't be a silo offer because, I mean, even myself as a person, I move into an area and take day by day different solutions as it fits to my specific niche in that specific moment.
Peter, I have a question to you with regards to understanding the citizen, or let's say the passenger in your future city. I mean, if you look at the aspiration that you have, it's around being cognitive, about anticipating needs, about eliminating the needs for mobility, which I personally find a quite charming notion. But what are you doing to really assess the mobility needs of the future citizens of NEOM?
Yeah, look, I think it's a couple of elements, right? So if you look at that cognitive experience, it's based on a couple of key elements, right? So one is that personalized experience. So how, as I think we're all talking about, you know, the modes of transport are now changing. There's ride sharing, you know, there's reuse of vehicles and infrastructure that comes along. But how do I, as an individual, get that personalized experience, right? So when I step into a shared use mobility device, how does it then adjust the seating or the music settings or the capabilities around that? So personalization is one. The second one about that is then predictive, right? So the technology needs to be predictive to say, I now know it's Peter who's stepping into this vehicle. I need to predict, you know, that capability around that. And the last thing is that consistent experience. So how do I make sure that it's consistent? I think, you know, what was presented at the start around using a common platform like Android, right, drives that consistency. If I've got to learn how to keep using the different technologies, as someone in my age living in NEOM, having to learn to ride an electric scooter was an interesting, somewhat maybe sometimes embarrassing experience, but you know, that's the thing. So it's all about personalized, predictive, and consistent.
And will it depend on opting in as a passenger or a citizen, or will you have means to anticipate or measure those needs on other bases?
Absolutely, and I think as you know, the panel has been saying, it's about this information sharing. But you know, still as an individual, I want to be in control of me and my information. So, what information do I share, and what information do I need to share? Right? If I'm sharing you know, shared transport module or pod or what I'm moving around, what information does it need from me? Does it really need my mobile number and my credit card and my date of birth and my passport number? Or just need to know that it's me and I've booked that device and I want to get from location A to location B?
Yeah. Which is quite an interesting topic for the architecture of those applications, right? And also the front ends. So actually curious to see how that works. Brings me back to Dharminder with regards to operating or building these systems in places where you don't have the privilege of working on a greenfield or starting from a greenfield, but you work with legacy environments. How big do you see the effort of transforming and integrating, you know, modern concepts of security and trust into the legacy environments of our transportation ecosystem especially in Western Europe, but also North America?
Yeah, so retrofitting is always a challenge, right? There will be a lot of security gaps. That's basically the scary part of this whole ecosystem. But everything always ties back with the data, right? Everything ties back to how I'm gonna secure. And AI is basically the big bet everywhere where you go, right? It's same with Palo Alto Networks. We invest heavily in AI, in security for AI, because we don't have that much skill sets around the globe for, just focusing on security. So AI is key for any retrofitting or any security that you are looking at, because you need to find the needle in the haystack. Mm-hmm. And manual work will not help. Automation will solve a little bit part of it. But at the end of the day, you need intelligence. Intelligence in a large scale to make this new way of moving from A to B secure.
So we've covered the, let's say, security aspect. We've covered a little bit the consumer needs. We covered the question whether we will see, let's say, the ecosystems merge or converge. One point to cover in this discussion here to basically also set expectations is, of course, also the regulatory framework under which technologies like we discussed can be brought to bear. Benjamin, I'm looking at you. You're operating some autonomous operations already in Germany. What's your experience with the regulatory framework that sets the scene basically for the technical possibilities? Do you see that moving at speed? Is it fast enough? Are there gaps? Are there hopes you can bring forward to accelerate the transition for travel beyond cars? Or travel with more shared cars, travel with autonomous public transport?
Yeah, I think on the regularity part, it really differs from country to country. We're currently operating or delivering software in more than 10 countries all over Europe. Finally, we see in Germany a pretty fast-moving legal environment. But for sure, I mean, it's R&D, because even if we see on a legal perspective, it's gone through all parliaments and we have it in law, it's still not practically done, and we are just in the mid of a process accepting a first level 4 operations in Germany, or let's finally also the first level 4 operations in public transport in Europe, and this is a way to go. But honestly, we see a lot of power from the legal governmental part. They want to go that path, and we see parts of it already done and considered. And secondly, we see also a lot of people moving into that direction, say, hey, let's put that theoretical law into practical practice and finally on the street. So quite confidential what we currently see.
All right. Ram, what limits you to go beyond the App Store into basically addressing people's need right on their cell phones? I mean, the question that I still have remaining open is, how do you make sure that you really capture people's movement needs? We're talking still about technology and assets and cars, but is it conceivable that at one point in time you don't need the entertainment system anymore and basically have the apps that you need on your personal device, because that's what follows you, that monitors you, that basically communicates all of your behaviors? Do you see that happening in the future?
So, of course, it starts with the apps, right? And then we look at the more of the connected experience that drives from the smartphone to what we actually see within the car, to how these experiences come and go. And we do see that in time, the world will move from more of an app-based model to a service-based model. And the experiences will be much more prevalent and seamless, whereby you don't need to necessarily carry your devices wherever you go. Basically, your experiences follow you where things go. So we definitely see that world changing and moving in that direction.
My final question goes to Peter, and I know we need to close. Peter, I still want to, out of curiosity, ask you, what do you wish for in terms of technology enablement after having been here on this great conference and exhibition? What's missing and what do you wish for to actually make your aspiration work?
Good question. I'd say one word, integration. Because I think this is the thing, as we've been discussing, right? You know, the future of mobility, I think the future of technology is made up of many different things, right? So we've talked about 5G, we've seen fiber, you're seeing, you know, space-based solutions. To deliver the mobility of the future, it's all going to be about integration, right? Integration of the information, integration of that user experience, integration with security, integration with the capability. So the one thing I would wish for is integration.
All right, that's a good final word. Thank you very much to all of the panelists, and thank you for the audience for being here.